Welcome to the American Mandate. I'm Camden.
I'm Grady.
So Donald Trump is continuing his anything that's anti-America, let's get rid of it. Let's move aside from it. Let's defund it. And so we talked last week basically how Donald Trump had blocked $400 million going to Columbia University, which crazy that we give that much money in federal spending to these colleges that hate our guts. But the whole thing came from anti-Semitic hate on campus and the university basically doing nothing about it. Well, it's kind of gotten interesting, and I kind of want your thoughts, Grady, on how this stuff is kind of going about. So Homeland Security posted on their X account, of all places, on March 9th, 2025, in support of President Trump's executive orders prohibiting anti-Semitism and in coordination with the Department of State, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement arrested Mahmoud Khalil, a former Columbia University graduate student. Khalil led activities aligned with Hamas and designated terrorist organization. ICE and the Department of State are committed to enforcing President Trump's executive orders and to protecting U.S. national security. Mahmoud Khalil told Columbia Press, "I haven't been able to sleep, fearing that ICE or a dangerous individual might come to my home. I urge you to intervene and provide the necessary protections to prevent further harm." And he goes on to accuse two Israeli students of doxing him, calling for his deportation, and saying that he hadn't been able to sleep, and he kept fearing about ISIS. Not ISIS, ICE. There's a lot there, and he had posted that the day before Homeland Security's thing. Basically, kind of my thoughts on it. Hamas, or Palestine from the river to the sea movement, you can get out.
Were they violent? Because I heard that they were, but I couldn't find any evidence of them being violent.
It's basically back and forth of both groups accusing the other ones of doxing and being violent. My thought process with it is, I'm not saying if you support Palestine as far as like two-state solution, or you're trying to like worried about the kids and innocent women that are being killed there, that's an argument, right?
If you're waving the Hamas flag,
I can have a conversation with you, but
Yeah.
if you are a leader on campus, and he already graduated, so he's not even a student. He's leading a pro-Hamas, pro-terrorist group that has been designated by the United States of America that they're terrorists. He's leading that group on campus. That is inciting violence to some degree.
I would like to read into it because I've never seen anything on it. I'm not going to just trust the government's word to say that they're anti.
But when basically I'm
But
going off
if what you say is true, I support deporting
That's what
them,
I'm talking
obviously.
about, because I think because of his argument of saying that, like, I'm fearing for my life. The thing is that there's not a denying that he is pro-Hamas. That's not something that is up for debate. And he's not an American citizen.
I know nothing about him.
He's not an American citizen. He graduated college. He's here on a green card. There's two sides of it, of like, have a little humanity with it, of being like, this is a free speech country, you should be able to say what you want. The other part to it is it's a free speech country for American citizens. We don't have to keep you here if you're anti-American interests and you're inciting violence on campus by pushing anti-Semitic
It's interesting.
crap.
Do you think a green card is that a gray area?
I don't think so. I think a green, because I think there's a difference. If you're pushing for citizenship,
Because if you're on a green card with the intention of citizenship and it takes years to get a citizenship, they should probably be protected under the similar rights of our Constitution, right?
yes, and that's kind of why I'm saying it's an interesting situation, and that's what I'm trying to get to. Is the beginning part is, if you're not an American citizen, I think you should get out if you're not an American interest. What I was leading into is the issue with, like, if we're holding Americans to this standard that you have free speech, and if he wasn't inciting violence and he was
Pro-Palestine.
I'm pro-Palestine, but all evidence seems like he's pro-Hamas more specifically. And if you're pro-Hamas, you're pro-October 7th. I do believe that they're like, that is an issue.
Yeah,
and I
of
think
course.
if you're running toward being a citizen, I don't want you being a citizen. Like that's just what do you bring that you got a college degree? That's the two sides of the argument. And so I didn't really see enough from it to like see that he be deported. I think these two Israeli students had a lot to do with pushing him specifically, because it is interesting that Homeland Security went after this guy specifically, and there's a lot of attention at Columbia University because of all the anti-Jew, basically. I can never say that word properly. Like, every time I say it, it just comes out like 3 different ways. But I don't know. Like, I think that I fear for my life with ICE. I do think there's also you know what you're getting into if you're taking a position and you're not an American citizen that is anti what America's interests are going after. And so I think it's kind of... It's in line with what the Donald Trump administration is basically saying, is that like if you're anti-American interests, that includes coming over the border illegally, that includes pushing and inciting violence on campus. I do think there is a little bit too much Jew protection. Now it's kind of like the other way, you know, of like we've been so hateful against Jews, and now because of everything in the Biden administration where we just didn't protect the Jewish people in a way, we're like going the other way, and we're being like, you gotta touch the Jewish people with kid gloves. And I think that's,
like I said, Trump bends over backwards for Israel. That's his track record. He's going to do the same thing this time. We should just expect that. But I do think that, you know, if what you're saying is true, this is obviously sensible and it's the right thing to do. But I worry that it's going to set a dangerous precedent, that it's like, if you're pro-Palestine, nonviolent, but you're, you know, on a green card, they're like, oh, we don't want you here. If that starts happening, I don't approve of that, obviously.
I think there's an interesting case, though, to be made. If, like, if he's pro-Hamas, like, I'm not allowed to be pro-ISIS.
Right.
Like, I'm not allowed to come out and say, like, I support ISIS. I get put on a watch list. Yeah. And then, like, my life is, like, zeroed in. And so if I was a non-citizen, I would expect to get kicked out.
Right. Especially if you're pro-Hamas.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. If I'm pro-ISIS. And so, like, if he's pro-Hamas, and that's his whole thing, is that he is a pro-Hamas leader on campus. If that is true,
he's got to go.
Then he has to go. And that's kind of what I'm trying to get to. And I think it's interesting for where we're country's at, because before we were like, come on, every single human being on the earth, let's come to the country. And, like, it is a clear, like, night and day between Donald Trump being like, we don't like you, you don't get to be here. It's a privilege for you to show up. It's a privilege that we give you a green card. It's a privilege that you get to be in our schools. And so I am curious, because he did also say, Khalil also said in his statement that Columbia University did not help him whatsoever and they weren't returning his calls. That's interesting. I think it has to do with the $400 million that we're talking about, that the school is trying to, like, get back in Trump's favor, because $400 million is not chicken change. So
why are we giving that much money to Columbia? That's crazy.
Why are we giving any much money to universities? We should not be giving all this money to all these universities, because, I mean, I know the definition of them. Not necessarily all of them are, like, for profit, like GCU is, but, like, come on. Like, there's, if you look at America, like, as far as our college system has just failed. Just a lot of the degrees don't make any sense. A lot of degrees do not put you into a place where you can actually make money.
College has been mostly a scam in terms of the amount of money people spend and how deep they go into debt.
There are really good programs, and they don't get highlighted. They're like, you have to go in expecting and knowing exactly what you want and knowing what your outcome is and having a job lined up. But here's the other thing. It's a four-year degree. Say what you need is a bachelor's degree, right? 4 years. Think about 4 years ago, how much has changed since then. Like, AI has become a lot more major, and the tech industry, like we heard about 4 years ago that the tech industry was just going to explode, and if you want to have a high-paying job, you have to get into coding, you have to get into all of these tech industries, and if you're trying to do something like become a history teacher and get a history degree, like, there's going to be aspects that's needed, but it's such a short-term kind of issue, and it can't be expected to just jump in and get a college professor level. Like, it's an interesting dichotomy, and I think that's the main issue that colleges have right now, is that they need to trim the fat, and they need to, like, of course we can talk about gender studies, we can talk about all these, like, feminism degrees, like, that's what the right focuses on, but that's not the root of the issue. The root of the issue is these programs that say, here's a communications degree, right? My stepdad got a communications degree, and so from when he did that, and I have to ask him. I think he got his master's as well, but he was from what I can tell from when he got his degree, he was able to actually use that. He actually learned a lot, and he's quite successful. Communications degree now is, why do you get it? Like, it's become a joke on campus. Anytime I hear someone getting a communications degree, they're like, yeah, I'm just getting my 4-year degree. And because there's no plan, there's no pathway, there's no, like, continuing after college. So that's the main problem with colleges. And before they get any more funding, that's the whole reason Department of Education is getting gutted, because just sending all these grants, sending all this money out, it's borderline a Ponzi scheme.
A federal judge just blocked that, by the way, as deportation.
The deportation?
Like 2 minutes ago.
Honestly, I understand it. I think it was, all of this happened really quickly. I mean, like, you and I were talking about the $400 million with Colombia last week, and it just went bam, 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 bam. Now this guy's getting deported. And so I think both the right and the left are trying to make this guy the face of it. Of, like, this is the face of anti-Semitism on campus. And the left is like, this is the face of Trump's deportations. Of just a student who came here with a green card, who wants to make it in America. They're going to do the whole sob story. I think the whole thing is just going to be like, he's not a great guy, but does he deserve to be deported? And I think that's going to be the main question that we're just going to see dominate X in the news for the next 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. Probably not 2 weeks, because, I mean, Donald Trump got shot, and that was like 3 days. But you had something, I don't know if you had any other thoughts on there before you move on to Tulsi Gabbard's comments.
No, that's about all I have to say on that subject. So Tulsi Gabbard made a statement today. She said, per POTUS's directive, I have revoked the security clearance and barred access to classified information for Anthony Blinken, which is our former Secretary of State, Jake Sullivan, Lisa Monaco, Mark Zaid, Norman Eisen, Letitia James, Alvin Bragg, and Andrew Wiseman, along with the 51 signers of the Hunter Biden disinformation letter. The president's daily brief is no longer being provided to former President Biden. Mm-hmm. So what do you think of all that?
I mean, you said Biden got revoked officially.
Well, he's no longer getting a daily briefing.
I mean, I think that's obvious. I mean, people are going to have short memories. 4 years ago, this is what Joe Biden did to Donald Trump. He basically said you get no information. Every president gets security. Like, even Jimmy Carter, at 100 years old, was getting a briefing saying, like, this is what's happening in the world. Whether he read it, doubt it. But the point being is that Joe Biden started this train by cutting off the briefing, cutting off security clearances from Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Donald Trump is just doing it back. I do not think Donald Trump would have done this to Joe Biden if it wasn't reciprocal. It's kind of the whole thing with the tariffs.
Well, Joe Biden's no longer sentient. So,
yeah,
you know
but
I mean?
I don't think that's not going to be the argument that is being made here, because if he's not sentient, it doesn't, like, it just seems like dumb. I think
he's not even living.
The main story is, I think, kicking off people like Anthony Blinken.
Yeah,
like, those are the people who are actually running the country. And
Anthony Blinken was responsible for most of what happened on foreign policy, obviously on foreign policy, but just in general, the last 4 years.
No, I think we downplay how much influence Anthony Blinken had, because we just say, like, oh, yeah, it was Anthony Blinken or somebody. But when you're in charge of foreign policy, that is think about how much damage Hillary Clinton did during the Obama years. Like, a lot of damage. And that's why I don't put everything at the feet of Obama. Of course, Obama put Hillary Clinton forward. Obama was a clear domestic policy guy, whereas Hillary Clinton did everything foreign policy. And Donald Trump, when he did it, Donald Trump was very much a foreign policy guy, and in return, he presided over a really good domestic economy. Moving into Biden just didn't do anything. Like, he was I don't know if you saw the report that came out that all the documents of all the executive orders he signed were like copy and paste. They weren't actually him signing. It was they took a signature and they basically pasted it in document. And I don't know what's coming of that. I think they're doing an investigation into that. But so he didn't actually officially sign it, except the letter that said that he was moving on to like giving it to Kamala Harris, the being in charge. And so it's interesting, but I don't know. That's kind of all I have to say on that.
Yeah, I don't have much to say other than it's obviously interesting. It's pretty sensible.
I do want to get into this because I think you might find this interesting. So it's kind of a numbers thing, and I know it's just one site, but U.S. News and World Report kind of every year does this ranking for states, whether on their crime, whether on their healthcare, and so top 10 was kind of half and half between liberal states and conservative states, with Utah hitting number 1, my home state of Washington hitting number 8, the state that me and I know Dima likes, which is Idaho, hitting number 5. And you want to know where we rank? In Arizona? 32nd. We're 30th in crime, 44th in education, 20th in healthcare, 42nd in natural environment, which, okay, like we had the Grand Canyon, we have Horseshoe Bend, we have plenty of places. Clearly, they just saw the desert and said, nope. But we're 10 in economy, 18th in infrastructure, which that's the one that surprised me because we have a specific tax here that is meant for our roads, and we put a lot of money into it. Maybe they're just talking about how it doesn't like
we've driven across the country.
Yes,
these are the best roads I've seen yet.
Yeah, I think that's important to say. Like I've driven from here all the way to Tennessee, and then I drove from New York all the way here to Arizona with you, and we've driven from Washington all the way down the coastline. So I guess we haven't hit the top half, and like from
who has better roads than this?
There isn't. I guess they have to talk about bridges. They're talking about like buildings because like unless you go up to Flagstaff, there's no like actual like caring as far as like how the buildings look, and I think that's probably what part of it is. But that
how fancy the buildings are.
Well, like how much attention to detail and like care that is putting in to have a cohesive
look at the highways,
look.
Man. Look at the walls and all the designs they put in.
Yeah,
they obviously care about the aesthetic.
Yeah, I think it's just.
I think people just don't like the desert aesthetic. No, like just rank them.
No,
all.
I think that's what it is because if you go to Washington, it's just a totally different feel.
They probably, they don't like the cookie cutter house thing.
Yeah,
here.
that's fair.
Like. Yeah.
That's very fair. But anyway, this whole thing, I wanted.
They just don't like the heat.
I want to get to bring up this point. So number 9 was Florida. And they came in number 1 in economy and number 1 in education. And I think why that's interesting.
Number 1 in education?
Yeah, because there was all this talk about how the war on Disney would have hurt the state's economy, or how the fight on DEI and colleges would hurt the state's education. And it doesn't seem to be affected. Governor Ron DeSantis actually has improved those numbers, and they have the number 1 economy and the number 1 education. Like, I think that's just fascinating, and that's a testament to what he's done just in the 6 years. Like their healthcare and a couple other things are like really low, but I mean, those are the two like big
so
ones.
He proves still that he's the best governor that the country's ever had. Really, I mean,
dude, if he could be a dictator of Florida, Florida would probably allow it, and they would be just like keep coming.
Well, I think, especially on the governor level, I don't think term limits should exist.
I think that is gonna. Well, I think that they should. I think they, but I do think it should be 3 terms. I think that would be my change because the whole point is that you're a president of a small country, essentially. Mm-hmm. Like think about Gavin Newsom. Like Gavin Newsom is in charge of the state with the 5th greatest GDP and the greatest GDP of our entire country.
They can't have it go both ways. Like either Congress needs to have term limits or the other one shouldn't because. It's just
but that's my point.
Goofy.
The president has term limits. Goofy. The president has 2 term limit, and so that's the thing is the governor.
So we'll put him in Congress.
But the thing is the governorship. It's by state. It's not across the board. Because if you think about it, with Glenn Youngkin can only have it can only do 1 4-year term, and then it has to be a space, and then they can come back and do another term, which is really stupid. That is like, really, that's what we're gonna, like. You can't have consistency, and so. I would be okay with 3 terms. I do think that's what makes that race interesting, though, in Florida, is because of how popular Ron DeSantis is. Byron Daniels versus Casey DeSantis, that's what it's going to be. It's going to be interesting if, like, in Florida, who has more pull, Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis? Because we already know what happened on a national level. But in Florida, Ron DeSantis was specifically like made that state turn red in the midterms, ridiculously red.
The fact that the MAGA movement like somehow hates that guy just because he ran for president.
Well, they're mad because he also speaks his mind, because for some reason MAGA was really pissed off about him attacking the Tate brothers. And I don't know what is the right is doing. Like they went to the UFC the other day, and Dana White is like giving them high fives and saying, "Welcome to the state." I'm like, do you understand who these guys are? Yes, they haven't been convicted, but let's just look at the videos of them beating up women.
They might not be guilty of sex trafficking, but they're obviously pimps. They're obviously bad people.
They're guilty of being POSs, that's
right.
for sure.
Let's just leave it at that.
Let's just be. And so why are we propping these guys up as great people for men? They're not.
No.
They take advantage of single men and weak single men who don't have it all figured out. And I'm sorry, they're, as you have said often, it is the reaction to feminism. It is the male reaction to feminism.
Yeah.
And so Ron DeSantis, just the more he talks, the more I'm like, yeah, I wish you were my president. And I really hope he does get the chance to be president, because I do think he could do.
He will. He will.
No, I think he will, to keep him on the national stage, just to keep like talking about. I mean, like people think it's unprecedented. Like Reagan ran 3 times, Nixon ran twice, and after losing, he didn't get to be president, and he was the vice president for Eisenhower. And then he ran for president, lost against JFK. And then he went to become governor, lost the California governorship. And then he went and won in 2 like pretty much landslide elections. Like the first one wasn't as landslide, but the second one definitely was. So that being the point is that there's no reason Ron DeSantis can't just keep running. I mean, think about it. Joe Biden ran for president 3 times. So I think we're all in agreement that he's not going to win this one. Vance is going to win, but I hope Vance chooses DeSantis as the vice president, and then that pushes DeSantis then to be on the national stage. That doesn't mean he'll win like the primaries the next time, but I think that's his best shot.
If we didn't have Vance right now, I would like be begging Ron to be the next president.
I have a DeSantis president hat for this last time. He was the person I wanted to become president.
He's gotten better. He's gotten better about. He's gotten better with like his charm and his.
He needs speaking. A new team.
He does. Whatever team he had that time.
No,
horrible.
Hey, let's go on X Spaces.
Yeah.
Are you that dumb? Like X Spaces, Elon just bought X, and so it's. I really hope he gets a shot. It is going to be interesting to see Casey DeSantis actually run and go against Byron Daniels, because that's going to be the test to see if MAGA in Florida is stronger than DeSantis's poll.
Yeah.
And I do think I think people do not think it's not as one-sided as people realize. DeSantis personally in his 4 years, like yes, Donald Trump got him in, but after that, all that was him the following 4 years.
Yeah.
And then his popularity during his second term has been all him. So it'll be interesting to see.
I agree.
But anyway, that's unfortunately all the time we have for today. Thank you again for joining us on American Mandate, and we'll see you tomorrow.